And you're listening, of course, to the Talkline Network.
Listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Here's your host.
Zev Brenner joining us right now is Kalev. His book is called The Assault on Judaism. The existential threat is coming from the West after October 7th. People think Hamas, and yes, Hamas is dangerous, and Hezbollah and Iran, but really there's a whole war going on, not just to eradicate Jews, but to eradicate Judaism. Our guest is a columnist at the Jerusalem Post. He analyzes long-term global geopolitical shifts. He looks at trends in Zionism, and he's written for the Jerusalem Report, Israel Hayom, the Daily Wire, Newsweek, author of Judaism 3.0, Judaism Transformation to Zionism, and chairman of the Judaism 3.0 think tank. Grew up in Tel Aviv. He served in the Israeli army, and he spent time in various European cities learning about contrasting worldviews. He now lives in Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I know that people, of course, are concerned about what happened after October 7th, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, but there's also been a change in how Jews are perceived around the world. And it's not only among non-Jews in European countries and even how the media portrays it, unfortunately, even among some Jews. But I know you've analyzed it and you gave it a lot of thought, and you've written a very interesting book about how there's a war against Judaism. So what do you mean by a war against Judaism? Most people perceive it as a war against Jews.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll say it straight out. We're in the midst of a multi-arena attempt to negate the idea of the Jewish state, and through that to negate the idea of Judaism. We had a physical attack on Judaism that occurred on October 7th, as we all know, and we've been fighting this war ever since. We are fighting a multi-arena physical war against Iran. But as we've shown, while Iranians and their proxies can kill a lot of Jews, we have the tools to fight against that. We have the tool to handle that. The thing that we do not pay enough attention to is the attack that's coming from the West in the form of sanctions, in the form of the indoctrination of the global public opinion. Once again, that the Jews are doing something badly. In this case, the Jewish state. We've all seen what happened in the ICC. As I like to say, what's going to kill us is not war, but war crime indictments. But in order to have war crime indictments, you need a war. And that's what October 7 provided. And that's what I show in the book, how over the last year, the various elements in the West have gotten together and are in an accelerated and a fast-moving attempt to negate the whole idea of Judaism.
Are you writing in your book that this changed in 1948 because before there were attempts to destroy Jews and kill Jews, whether it was Hitler, and you go back to Haman and go back to the Roman period, but since 1948, it's given anti-Semites and those that want to destroy Judaism a target. Instead of saying we want to destroy Judaism, they say we want to destroy Israel or find fault with Israel.
Absolutely. I mean, the attack on Judaism has always followed the most relevant aspect of Judaism. And so, when Jews were religious and when Europe was religious, then the currency was religious opposition, as we had through the Middle Ages. When Jews became secular and emancipated and successful in Europe, a new ideology came about called anti-Semitism, which, by the way, is a relatively new term that was used for that specific ideology, secular opposition to Judaism. Now that, as I said in my previous book, Judaism 3.0, Zionism has become what I call the organizing principle of Judaism. People relate to Jews and Judaism primarily through the national aspect of Judaism, through Zionism, whether it's in the positive or in the negative. And therefore, the opposition followed us through there. And the attempt to destroy Judaism is done through an attempt to destroy the Jewish state. And that attempt, again, is not a physical one, but an ideological one. We are a little bit arrogant to believe that, all of a sudden, after 2,300 years of opposition, the establishment of the Jewish state would end Western European, in particular, opposition to Judaism. As we've seen, certainly over the last year, it's quite the contrary.
You've studied Herzl, but Herzl seemed to believe otherwise, right? He felt having a Jewish state would solve some of these problems.
Herzl, and I've studied Herzl for 15 years or so. Herzl didn't think it will solve and end it. I mean, Herzl used our contemporary terminology. The establishment of the Jewish state would be conflict management rather than the end of everything, because Herzl recognized after originally he was much more optimistically, but eventually he recognized that European opposition to Judaism is chronic. It's permanent. It will evolve in whichever, as I mentioned, European circumstances, Jewish circumstances will be. And the Jewish state will allow you to do two things. One, it is the right interface to manage the European-Israeli conflict, the European-Jewish conflict. And the other, it will create what we would call today peace through strength. Because once the Jewish state will be established, once the Jews are emancipated from the persecution that they've been subjected to for years, they will advance humanity in ways that we cannot even imagine. And therefore, the world, Europe and the entire world will need the Jewish state to thrive. So Herzl concluded that the Jewish state will exist not out of charity, and it wouldn't end the European-Israeli conflict, but we will have this peace through strength. You would need Israel, you would need the Jewish brain, you would need Jewish innovations, you would need that crisp light that's coming out of Zion for the benefit of the world. And that is exactly what we're saying today. So on the one hand, the opposition continues and it funnels itself through the Jewish state. And on the other, the world needs innovations that are coming out of Israel.
In years past, in 2,000 years, when you had attempts to eradicate Jews or Judaism, you had the Greeks, and I know with Hanukkah coming up, there was a spiritual situation where they wanted Jews to assimilate as opposed to annihilate Jews, and you had the Romans, and you had the Babylonians, you had all the Hitler and Haman, but you had a leader who led the opposition. In today's day and age, you're saying there's a war to eradicate Judaism. Who is the leader? Where is it coming from?
Well, that's a great question, because like we say, in every generation, somebody's trying to eradicate us. But it's not just that person trying to eradicate us, and the methods are different. It's also the structure, and the structure today is the assault on Judaism is not linear. It is very nuanced. It is layered. It is done not just by enemies, but also by people who are our friends. Sometimes they can be our friends. Sometimes they can be our adversaries. People that, European countries that support us and help us in the physical attack on Judaism that's coming from Iran, also partake in the ideological assault on Judaism that are coming from themselves. So it is a much more nuanced and layered, and I try to outline it in my book to explain that this is not, there's a natural tendency always to focus on last centuries or the last threat. It's not the last threat. It's not a physical threat. It's an ideological threat. And it is not a linear threat coming from an army and a hierarchy. It is a much more abstract threat, and therefore we need creative tools to address it that I'm offering in the book.
No, but I understand that, but is there leadership? Because you have Campus Anti-Semitism, you have Iran funding that, you have other group funding it, you have George Soros' foundation funding it, but you have Europe, you have the ICC, International Criminal Court, you have so many different players out there. But it doesn't seem to be coordinated, but they seem to be all focused on hurting and eradicating Israel and the Jewish people.
Exactly. It's not coordinated. There's no they don't all meet the elders of the Israel bashers and anti-Zionists. They don't, but the ecosystem and the social circles are such. I have friends, in the media. I have friends in the UN, I have friends in the EU. Somehow they all use the same talking points. Whether it's a two-state solution, the status quo is unsustainable, the humanitarian, the same talking points, the same sound bites, because we live in a world where, it used to be in a world, if you were in France and if you were in New York and if you were, in someplace else, you would have, it will take years for you to synchronize your messages. Today, those messages are synchronized right away. We have certain leaders, depending, on the, as I mentioned, the attack on Judaism is expanding into more and more and more arenas, and at different times it's different arenas that are leading it. So we have organizations like the ICC, as you mentioned, and the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, You have governments that are collaborating with them. You have the Western media. You have social pressures. All of those forces come together to deliver something that is very, very scary and that when we're not focused on. And I'm very glad that you are, and that you've stated that. As you know, I'm in the U.S. on a book tour, and when I do briefings and when I do talks, people are saying, "Wow, this is surprising. We haven't, we're focused on Iran, we're focused on the physical war that's happening, but we're not focused on this." And that is one of my objectives, to get people to focus that there is, we shouldn't just fight the war of yesterday. There is a threat that's coming from the West. It's expanding very fast. Just to kind of use one example, the fact that France, Belgium, Canada complied, said they will collaborate with the ICC is astonishing. It's symptomatic of how deeply entrenched this assault on Judaism. Because what is the ICC? What is those actions? They say they're they're accusing us once again, as they've done throughout the century, of deliberate starvation of Palestinians. They've issued the arrest warrants against just two individuals, our leaders, the defense minister and the prime ministers, but they said they'll do more, and they didn't operate alone. So it's very clear they're setting up the groundwork for the possible arrest, of all Israeli soldiers, of those who support them. And France, Belgium, all those countries don't say, "Oh, we're going to sanction the ICC. We're going to kick you out." They say, "Sure, we will comply." That is astonishing. And that's just, again, symptomatic about how quick, how deeply entrenched, how socially mainstream this era attempt to eradicate Judaism, which is done through an ideological attack, just how deep and well and broad it is. And it is very alarming, and sadly, people are not focused on that.
And what's also interesting is people think that starting after October 7th, the Hamas narrative has been picked up by media, even the President of the United States quoting Hamas, health sources for how many how many Palestinians were killed, and doesn't differentiate between combatants and terrorists and natural deaths. And even the numbers are grossly inflated. Just came out this week that the numbers are greatly inflated, but yet they pick up on it. But this didn't just start October 7th. It maybe got more attention after October 7th. This was going on for a while, right?
Absolutely. And it so happened 3 weeks before October 7th, we held a symposium in the Judaism 3.0 think tank in cooperation with the Begin Center in Jerusalem, especially exactly about that, about the assault on Judaism coming from the West, what later became, a book. But my previous book, Judaism 3.0, that claims that Judaism is going through a transformation and Zionism is becoming its anchor. We've done a number of events to explore various aspects of this thesis in the Begin Center in Jerusalem and on Zoom. And the last one was exactly about this topic. Is about, okay, let's say that I'm right and Judaism is transforming and Zionism is becoming its anchor and the most relevant aspect of Judaism. What does it mean? And what I said there in that event, which was September 13th, I believe, 2023, is that, look, we have an attack on Judaism that's done through a sword and a shield. The sword is Israel bashing and anti-Zionism. That is the way to try to destroy Judaism in our era. But the shield is Judaism 2.0, is this image, this perception that Judaism is merely a religion. And when you're attacking Zionism, when you're attacking Israel, you're not attacking Judaism. You're just attacking, the Jewish state. You're attacking Zionism. And Zionism is maybe even an aberration of Judaism. That's the only way that you can attack Judaism, because we have an asset today that we didn't have in throughout the centuries, which is that in those circles, it is taboo to say that you're an anti-Semite, that you hate Jews. In the 19th century, Herzl had friends who were anti-Semites. It was legitimate to say you're an anti-Semite. Today, it's not. So you have to say, I'm an anti-Zionist, but I'm not an anti-Semite. You have to say that you're in Judaism 2.0, that Judaism is a religion, and it's not Zionism, that's its anchor, it's its religious aspect. Once there's a broad recognition that Judaism is transformed and Zionism is become the organizing principle of Judaism, you cannot hide behind this facade. So this was the exit point of this symposium we held in the Begin Center on September 13, 2023. And I've outlined there a theoretical path to the destruction of Judaism And I was met with a lot of skepticism. You know, the sanctions, actions of the ICC, what I called an economic siege of Jerusalem. It's not just, you know, threat. It's not just arrest. It's that the threat or the mere, you know, if somebody thinks that you might, there's a chance is going to be arrested, he's not going to go to Europe. Europeans are not going to do businesses with us. So I talked about all of that, and people were like, some people thought
France,
paranoid.
it wasn't France who banned Israel from participating in a munitions or an armament show that took
Exactly.
place.
In comes October 7th, you know, and all of the things like this have happened. You know, there's dozens of things have happened. October 7th comes along, October 8th, October 9th, October 10th, people still, you know, we love you, Israel is nice, but they turned against us very, very quickly. And arena after arena, action after action, France, you know, like you said, first they said, Israeli companies are not allowed to participate because we don't want this weaponry to be used against Gazans. Then it was Israeli citizens are not allowed to participate, the Jews out. So you're seeing, again, the same patterns you saw in the last century. You know, France, you know, somebody's issuing arrest warrants against the Jews, France collaborate. You know, Jews out, like you said, like in your example. The same things that you've seen back then, but it is much more mainstream. It is much more, it is done by the establishment. And you know, I talked to people over the years about the Holocaust and French, and a lot of French are telling me, you know, yes, there was an attempt to eradicate Judaism in the 20th century, and yes, we the French collaborated when there was arrest warrants issues against the Jews, but we had no choice because the Germans invaded us. Now, last I checked, the ICC did not invade France. They voluntarily said that they will collaborate. Then they try to dial it down a little bit. You know, the Belgians said the same thing, the Spanish, the Canadians. So you're seeing, a much more mainstream assault on Judaism in the 21st century than you did in the 20th century, and it is very alarming.
Our guest is Gal Kalev. His book is called The Assault on Judaism. The Existential Threat is Coming from the West. We're going to be right back. When we come back, we'll try to take some of your phone calls, 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. Email is a great way to have your questions answered, zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. By the way, we're still giving out books from the Haftorah and its Parsha, written by former Assistant Attorney General of New York, Richard Golden. If you want a copy of the book sent to your home, the Haftorah and its Parsha, please send us an email to zev@talklinenetwork.com. Please put the Haftorah in the byline. Must give us your name, address, and zip code in order to qualify. Coming up a little later on tonight, Rabbi Shia Hecht, Malcolm Hoenlein, and Bobby Rechnitz. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Hey, Stan.
How are you?
Okay, how are you? Hey, Stan.
How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Thank you for listening to this episode of Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981. Please call us with your questions and comments at 212-769-1925. That's 212-769-1925. Or email us at zevbrenner@gmail.com.
And we're back. Our guest, Goel Kalev. His book is called The Assault on Judaism. He's a writer for the Jerusalem Post. You can read him in lots of other publications as well. We're looking at the war against Judaism. Let's go to Stan. Are you there in Forest Hills? Go ahead, Stan.
I am. Good evening. Good evening. I want to wish you also, I want to wish you a happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Did you win? I have to tell our audience, when we did a live broadcast from Dunkin' Donuts in Kew Garden Hills, who was the first person online to win coffee for a year? Stan, did you get your free coffee?
I got the coffee. It wasn't
Okay.
bad, but the donuts were just as good.
All right, good. Enjoy. Enjoy.
All right.
You got your
Let me,
questions.
thank you. As I know, and I think history shows it, we've always been having problems. It's gotten worse over the last couple of years, especially since the war that's gone on. And there's always been hatred and trying to get rid of Israel and the Jews. That's nothing new. It's been a little bit more than it normally has been. But don't you think that because of the International Court, which the United States doesn't give a damn about, and I don't think Israel does, and some other countries, really has no force to do anything. I know some of these countries will try to get the prime minister and so forth. Don't you think it will sort of get less and less a little bit? That may sound naive, but don't you think since the situation has just happened here in Israel, that things may get a little less than you expect?
So what Stan's really asking is that as the war winds down and people's attention gets focused elsewhere, won't the war against Judaism also abate to a certain degree?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Stan, you're right that there's the news cycle thing, but the news cycle will come back. And, before October 7th, just even a few months before October 7th, there was a BBC presenter that indoctrinated her audiences that the Jewish soldiers love killing Palestinian children. And that was in the context of, she interviewed Naftali Bennett, and there was a military operation in Jenin, and some of the terrorists of the Islamic Jihad in Jenin were under 18. So she took that into not just saying you killed children, but that the Israeli soldiers love doing that. We went from using the blood of children reluctantly because we need them for matzahs, to like just being happy to kill children. So this is just, I'm just pointing to this escalation. But, so I completely agree with you, Stan, that the war, creates, puts Israel and the Palestinians front and center. The Western public mindset says, oh, we need to be a balanced thing. So, October 17 happened, in a vacuum, and you Hamas doing horrible things to you, but you're also doing horrible stuff to the Palestinians. So that is the current framing. But we had, as you said, we had that throughout the centuries, and we had that, all the times whenever there's something in Israel. So I think we will continue to have that. The ICC have went against us way before October 7th. They also went against the United States. Trump sanctioned them back in 2020, and I would expect that to continue. Even if there's a ceasefire.
That the peace treaty that was done in the Trump administration, I'm not for that peace treaty because I think it's watered down. These people aren't belligerent, but they've been doing business with Israel for many years.
Yep.
And now, obviously, President Biden wanted to get Saudi Arabia, and that's one of the reasons that this situation happened. And I think Saudi Arabia, I don't know if you agree, will, in the long term, I think, sign a deal with Israel. Do you agree with that? That things might, once that happens, things might calm down, in your opinion?
Once there's a deal with Saudi Arabia, or once there's a deal with the Palestinians?
Anti-Semitism, it will always be, it's going to be there, you know that. But as we keep dealing with the Arabs as the Saudi Arabia, do you think things will get less and less, or do you think it's going to get worse?
I don't think it's going to get worse. I mean, I think, look, the big secret that everybody knows is that the Arabs like us. I mean, they want to make peace with us. Not like us because they're staunch Zionists from birth, because, exactly as Herzl identified, as I mentioned earlier, this is peace through strength. They want to benefit from all those innovations, this crisp light with that's coming out of Zion. They want to, as the verse said, those who bless Israel are blessed; those who curse are cursed. They want to bless, so they will be blessed. And the West has a different agenda, and the West opposition to Judaism is so strong that they don't even care if they're blessed or not. They want to curse, and nothing will stop them. I mean, the fact that all those countries collaborate with the ICC works against them. Because we're in Israel known as the most moral army in the world. You can debate that or not, but if you put us, if Israel is committing war crimes, then the French soldiers, the Belgian soldiers, the British soldiers, they too will be committing war crimes against humanity. How can France said to the ICC, we will arrest Israel, but once you issue an arrest warrant against a French soldier or political leader, we're not going to comply. So they're acting against their own interest for this grand cause of cursing Israel and acting against Israel.
Anyway, Sam, thank you for your phone call, and keep drinking that coffee. Thank you. Okay. But here's the thing, though, and you write about it, I think, in your book as well, is that it's more than just, you have the ICC and you have all these, they're going to issue arrest warrants against Bibi and Gallant and maybe other Israeli leaders and soldiers. But what about the United Nations? You write about them right after October 7th. They came out with some vicious statements regarding Israel. Is there a possibility, and this may up the ante, if they impose sanctions against Israel? Is that a possibility?
Of course. I mean, I think less of a possibility since Trump got elected. But,
thank God, yeah.
Of course, this is the fear, and this is the very, very fine line that Israeli leadership, that Bibi and the Israeli government had to walk through, because that threat exists. The threat in warfare today is not just against the armies, but against those multinational powers and governments that can do a lot of that. I mean, it's not even theoretical. We've been given sanctions already, by Canada, by at least a threat that the French and the UK, the British would do that, not give us arms. Canada. I mean, sounds like a small little example. Canada at one point said that they will effectively sanction the Jewish National Fund. They'll revoke their tax-exempt status of an environmental organization, essentially. Why? Because Israeli soldiers benefit from their services. Israeli soldiers breathe fresh air. Well, so does the rest of the world. So do Arabs, so do Palestinians, but that's not the point. We want to attack Israel. That became the value. And so, so a lot of people would love to sanction Israel, and doesn't really matter for what, but would love to sanction Israel in the UN and elsewhere. And that is certainly a concern. I think a lot of people are kind of nervous about the next month or so until President Trump takes office. I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal the other day that asked President Trump to hold responsible and accountable those countries who are threatened to do this and to comply with the ICC. Because there's another element that we haven't spoken yet about here, but I speak about the book, is that the assault on Judaism is also a proxy for an assault on America. It becomes very quickly into a U.S. national security threat, both for obvious reasons. The ICC indictments can be cut and paste, to the, against American soldiers, but also in a deeper attempt to negate the Judeo-Christian values that the United States is founded upon, and to challenge the U.S.-led world order that has been in place basically for a number of decades. That U.S.-led world order is based on American military might and economic might. Now what they're trying to do is to create this new thing that we can call legal might or warfare might. The ICC and the UN and all those people, so they can tell America, France can tell America, look, we need you, America, for your military might and economic might, but now you need us, France, because the ICC can issue an arrest warrants against Trump, against Obama, against Clinton, against American soldiers for deliberate starvation of Iraqi troops, and you will need us to stop that. You will need us, France and Belgium and Spain, to stop us. So be nice to us. So that's why I think it is imperative, and that was the Wall Street Journal op-ed, that President Trump, even before he takes office, ask those world leaders to issue a statement, a pledge that they will not collaborate with the ICC or any type of lawfare against the United States or the Jewish state, because this disrupts this attempt to challenge the U.S.-led world order.
Yes, this is Kalev. The book is called The Assault on Judaism. The existential threat is coming from the West. We're going to be right back. And if you'd like to chime in, our numbers are 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. Email's a great way to communicate, zev@talklinenetwork.com. We have a lot more books to give away, and thank you for those that responded. If you'd like to win a copy of the book, The Haftorah and its Parsha, written by former Assistant Attorney General of New York, Richard Golden, to be delivered to your home, please send me an email to zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Put Haftorah in the byline, Tuesday, and just put down your name, address, and zip code, and we'll get you a copy. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Malcolm Hoenlein, Rabbi Shia Hecht, and philanthropist from Los Angeles, Bobby Regnes, all upcoming through tonight's broadcast.
Listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
Here's your host.
Our guest, Kalev. His book is called The Assault on Judaism. He's a writer for the Jerusalem Post, but this is his second book, and it's called The Greatest Existential Threat to Judaism in 2,000 Years is Coming from the West. Judy in Brooklyn, your question for our guest. Go ahead, Judy.
Hi. You know I'm not going to give a question. You know that, Zev, right?
Okay. So,
by the way, how was Stan? How was Stan when you met him? First time you met Stan?
the first time I met Stan, it was great to see him. Listen, the first person online was a listener, and the last person online was a listener who won the coffee for the year. So it was good to see Stan and other people there. But anyway, your question for our guest, or comment, I should say.
Okay, great. I have like a few fast comments before that, but I have to tell you, Stan, I have a lot of respect for him. I'll tell you why. He still remembers his bar mitzvah something or other. Shetel, I don't know what it was. And he also keeps his mother's yurt side. He's got a few brothers. He's the only one. So, Stan, no matter what, I have a lot of respect for you. Back to this. Listen, I got a few things to say. The ICC is totally corrupt, okay? They should be banned, and Germany is part of it. I'm not surprised on that one. 2, Israel. Israel has the worst PR. The worst PR, people, okay? The amount of lies that go against Israel, and they don't do much about it. Nothing. If anything, Alan Dershowitz lately wrote some sort of pamphlet with 10 lies against Israel. Where is Israel working on a great PR? And then let me just say also, the mere mention Palestinians is a lie. There is no letter P like Palestinian in the Arabic alphabet, okay? It's made up. Yasser Arafat, an Egyptian, mind you, made it up for lying propaganda, and they're winning the propaganda war. And this is why we're in this. This is part of why we're in this trouble.
So your question that you have for our guest is, if you have a question for him?
I would wonder if this guest thinks anything I said inspires him in any which way. Like the worst PR that Israel, they're just terrible. You know, so many lies against Israel. Israel are the good guys. They do not do any of this crazy stuff. It's crazy. I was reading a thing with this person in Gaza, and now he became on the Israeli side, but when he was a kid, he grew up. It was terrible. He went into the school at age 7. They start in age 7, and they start teaching them to kill Israelis, whatever, and that the Israelis have 3 legs and horns and God knows what. And when he went to look, they gave him candy. They were kind. There were no 3 legs. They're full of lies. They're crazy.
So I'm going to let Gal respond to you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Judy, for those comments. I mean, I agree that we have bad PR, but I don't think. I mean, sadly, we can always improve. But I think this is much deeper than that. Theodor Herzl, that I mentioned, I studied. He mocked the idea of PR. At this time, PR was done through what was known as committees against anti-Semitism. And it said this is futile because you cannot change dogmatic minds. And we will not be able to change dogmatic minds no matter how great the speakers are. And you mentioned some great people who represent us. I mentioned earlier this BBC interview with Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett, you can agree or disagree politically. He speaks very coherently. He's a great PR asset. And still, in this interview with the BBC person, that he should, it's an easy win. You have Islamic Jihad terrorists in Jenin murdering, Israelis on the roads. So Israeli soldiers are fighting back those Islamic Jihad terrorists. The BBC presenter spins it as, well, you guys are killing children because those terrorists are under 18. Those terrorists who are shooting, who are murdering, are under 18. You guys are killing. And still, I bet if you take a survey after that, who won this?
Can I stop you?
Who won? Naftali Bennett or the BBC? Who will the BBC because she's credible. She was perceived as credible, and an Israeli is perceived as, okay, that's one side of the story. So PR is important, but I think what's more important is to recognize, and we haven't, and that's the subject of my book, and it's part of the objective here, is to recognize that there is this assault, strategic assault, coming from the West at us, to recognize how dangerous it is. Because so far we've just been saying, well, it's anti-Semitism, well, it's just bad PR, it's the bias in the media. We have to address it strategically as a threat and respond to it strategically in the similar tools and manners that we would respond to a military threat.
Judy, I'll do a quick
Well,
response. I'm going to move on. Yes, go ahead, Judy.
Absolutely. But when I say PR, I'm talking about books in the schools that the Arabs put in, like from Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry to say, in other places, they send these books full of lies, all the PR, and these books are distributed to the kids in schools, okay, over here. And then you got them all indoctrinated with all these lies, one upon the other. Why can't Israel produce books countering it? Why can't Israel show real videos and stuff from the atrocities and the truth about things and not the lies? There's so much out there, so much technology that you could use in various ways to bring, the propaganda war is tremendous. You got to fight them. You got to fight them with whatever they use against you. You know, Hamas now had all these things recently. They go, oh, full of lies. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't rape anyone. They didn't cut anyone's baby's heads. Nothing, which couldn't be further from the truth. But they have all these videos. Why did not show it to the world? Why don't they show it to everybody?
So, look, Alexander, you want to know why Israel can't do and doesn't do a better job in public relations. That's really the gist of the question. Go ahead, Gal.
Yeah, I think, Judy, you're onto something when it says, I mean, when I said you need to respond to it strategically in the same way that you respond to any other threat, then you mentioned a few things. You know, for example, one of the hundreds of fronts is textbooks and books and, getting into publishers, getting into the people who decide in various education systems which textbooks are going to be read by people. So that's exactly what I meant, that there needs to be a strategic response in hundreds and hundreds of fronts. And you've mentioned a few of them. And I think once we start taking this seriously, then we can address the public opinion. We can address the notion. We have to speak to people in their own language. The Western pro-Palestinian movement, in my view, is an example of Western colonialism. They say that many of them think that they're fighting colonialism, but they're the colonialists because they've hijacked the Palestinian cause and use it for themselves. When they wear a keffiyeh, by the way, I mean, talk about this. This is like counter-war. That is colonialism because, Palestinians are not wearing keffiyehs today, unless they're, part of Hamas or things like that. And the keffiyeh, by the way, they wear, most of the demonstrators tend to be Jordanian keffiyeh. So they're sort of implying that there is no such thing as Palestine. So I'm just using that, and I have more examples in the book of exactly talking to people in their own language and getting them, in a very sophisticated way to understand that they're the colonialists. So if you're supporting woke or DEI, don't be counter woke and counter DEI. There's other causes that you can support, the environment and things like that. But the Western pro-Palestinian movement is a Western colonialist movement. So that's just one example. You mentioned an example in a textbook, but there's multiple fronts, and we have to address this Western assault on Judaism strategically.
Anyway, Judy, thank you for your phone call. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
About the Pope, wasn't there a scene relating to the Christmas scene where they had the baby Jesus was in the keffiyeh? I think that was taken away, where they took away the whole nativity scene. But the fact that the Pope can buy into this propaganda?
I have a lot of Catholic friends who are not happy about this, to say it very mildly.
Now, we're sitting on a story, and we're hoping to get it done, but I know it's going through litigation. As I said earlier, this process of hating Jews and anti-Semitism didn't just start October 7th. It became more public. Now, we're sitting on a story October 7th, where a student in the college, and she wrote a story about an Eruv, about the wire that, for the Sabbath. She wrote a paper. So the professor says, why are you writing this about the Eruv? She's writing about what Israel's doing, putting the Palestinians in ghettos and killing them and torturing them. And then she complained, and another class gave her a C, even though everybody else in her circle got A's. And she's facing discrimination. She's suing the college, and I believe the court said that she can continue her suit. But this is just an example of what's going on in college campus. This is Judy. She's writing about an Eruv, which is a religious symbol, and they're talking to her about, Palestinians and ghettos and killing Palestinians, etc. This is what's going on. It's mind-boggling.
Absolutely, and there's sadly a shift in the people that are pro-Israel, that at least that I anecdotally speak to, and the shift is that a lot of people are saying, yeah, you guys are indeed killing the Palestinians, but but they killed you first. Meaning there is less and less of this acknowledgement that the lies that professor you mentioned, are just lies. People are saying, oh yeah, this professor is right. I guess you are putting them in concentration camp and killing them, but in war like in war. So this is very, very concerning, and this was created by the indoctrination from the West. Look, we're going to celebrate Hanukkah in a few days, and I don't think Hanukkah was as meaningful as it is this year, because Hanukkah, at least for me, is about the inception of the European opposition to Judaism, of the European-Israeli conflict. The Greeks invaded, and they didn't just want, taxes and land, and they wanted to undo Judaism. They launched an ideological war on Judaism. So in the multiple assaults we had from Europe on Judaism, some were physical, like last century, some were ideological. The Greeks were the one who launched an ideological attack on Judaism, trying to negate the idea of Judaism. 2,300 years later, today, we are in the midst of Hanukkah again. We are in the midst of another attempt to negate the idea of Judaism through negating the idea of the Jewish state, once again coming from Europe. And I, just like we survive in Hanukkah, b'kol dor vador omdim alenu lachalutenu, in every generation somebody tries to eradicate us, but we know the other side of the verse, and we will prevail.
I always like to joke, so many Hamans are only one Purim. We have so many anti-Semites out there. But here's the interesting thing. In times gone by, whether, you had the Romans or you had Haman, I don't know if you had a Jewish people, you can say, listen, I don't hate Jews. Here's my Jewish advisors. But here you have, like, Iran has Neturei Karta, where they can say, we don't hate Jews. Look at them. We got the most religious Jews that are part of us. You even have Jews in America that have Jews for Justice, and you have other groups that they claim to be Jews, but I'm not sure how Jewish they are. But I think some of the propaganda also affects Jews, where we saw the demonstration where they're wearing talesim and yarmulkes. I don't think they go to synagogue. I don't think they wear a yarmulke or a talis, but to demonstrate against Israel, then they wear these religious symbols.
Absolutely, exactly. That's what I said that's why we know we're in Judaism 3.0, and Zionism is the anchor, where Jews connect to Israel in a negative. A Jew that has nothing to do with Judaism writes a Facebook post, as a Jew, I'm embarrassed about Israel. But it also works in the other direction, because people, including in the ICC and elsewhere, look at Jewish leaders in America and say they said it. So, I'm hesitant to mention particular examples, but I'll mention Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, goes on the Senate floor and basically echoes, what was said by Amen and what was said in the last century, in Europe. The Jews are a pariah opposed by the rest of the world. He says, stop being a pariah opposed by the rest of the world. To imply that we're a pariah opposed by the rest of the world is that's what we told about us every time. But he makes a little kind of footnote. It's not the Jews, it's the Jewish state. The Jews on this side of the ocean are okay, but the Jews in the Jewish state are a pariah opposed by the rest of the world. So if you're the ICC, if you're a media outlet like the BBC, if you're something, as Judy mentioned, writing textbooks against Israel, then you have, Chuck Schumer, who for years have been known as a supporter of Israel, he calls himself Shomer Israel, and he implies on the Senate floor that the Jewish state, is a pariah. So, so there must be a pariah. Those Jewish leaders, going against Israel is perceived as points of credibility by the other side, because whether we like it or not, the other side doesn't make the same distinction that Jews make between the Jewish state and Jews.
How about you say Shomer Yisrael? Are you sure you heard right? Didn't you say Shomer Yishmael? Did you hear correctly?
I every time in my book talks I mention Chuck Schumer in front of Democrats and leftists, I was surprised that they, they don't like me they don't like him. A lot of people that used to like him don't like him,
I think at one point
I've heard much worse than what you just said.
I think at one point he had Israel's back. I think politics and after Obama, and that changed it, and it became more apparent even now, where he said what he said about Bibi and about Israel. Yeah. It's just terrible.
Yeah, and maybe it's indicative of what we just spoke about, because he's been in politics for 50 years. He's an astute politician, and if he decides to basically make a career, a legacy-changing decision from being perceived as Shomer Israel, for being, a staunch supporter of Israel, to going to the other side, he must be reading the political map. I trust his political instinct. So that might be indicative, or at least in his view, of a very seismic shift that's happening, with the electorate, whether it's the Democratic Party or maybe it's Democratic donors, because he's not up for election for a long time.
Showed in this election that Donald Trump won the popular vote, electoral vote. It was by wide margin, even places like New York and New Jersey where he did much better than anticipated. So I think it's a time for the Democrats to recalibrate. I'm not sure because AOC and the squad are making noise and looking to go further, and people such as Chuck Schumer have now really stopped them and said, listen, you can't do what you're doing. And but they get appointed to important committees, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, this is very concerning, and so it's and that could be what it is. It could be, okay, I'm representing everybody, and I have to represent that other side that thinks that Israel is a pariah. I don't know. I wish success to everybody who chooses to serve, and I hope they serve in a way that supports American values, and part of it is supporting Israel and being not calling us names like pariah and bigots, and not inciting the world against us. But I think it is indicative, one way or another, the fact that he has turned is indicative of some sort of thing that he's reading in the political landscape, and this is something of concern and something that requires us to develop comprehensive strategies to address.
We're almost out of time. So you addressed it a little bit before. So what should we be doing to stop this war against Judaism and Jews?
So I think there's a number of levels. I offer both kind of long-term, kind of deep strategic frameworks that I talk mostly in kind of smaller briefings because it's very complex and long-term. Part of it is this Judaism 3.0 thing. I mean, once there is a recognition that we are that Zionism is becoming the anchor of Judaism, you cannot say anymore that, you can only say that the Jewish state is a pariah opposed by the rest of the world if you're saying that Jews are a pariah opposed by the rest of the world. So once there's and I think that October 7th, paradoxically, somebody says, turn Judaism 3.0 from a thesis into a depiction of day-to-day reality. You mentioned college campuses. If you have a Jewish last name, you get pulled into your Judaism, because, somebody says your people are killing the Palestinians and you have to react.
I spoke to people such as the former Yair Lapid's wife who said her book, she's trouble selling it and portraying it in books because of Israel and Judaism. Are you having a problem with your book too?
No, actually, my last book actually had a lot of Judaism 3.0 was completely non-political. I had a lot of people from
progressives and Muslims and people
that bought it.
That was before.
That was before. This book, I don't. It's hard for me to tell what's the profile. I mean, I can ask. I don't know if the publisher can have. How deep their research goes in terms of who's buying it. But I would imagine that not a lot of pro-Palestinian people are buying this book. I do get pushbacks in talks. I mean, the pushback tends to be actually more from the right, like that I'm giving too much, that I'm too nice to people like Chuck Schumer and others, that I'm too understandable. But again, I make also some specific recommendations about what the United States can do. One is, which is granted controversial, is that because this has become a U.S. national security, the assault on Judaism is a conduit to attack America indirectly, then the assault on Judaism should be handled as a national security issue on the National Security Council and not by an anti-Semitism envoy. Because in the last, both in the Biden administration and I believe in the last Trump administration, it's anti-Semitism. There was sort of like downplaying it as anti-Semitism, and therefore there's an anti-Semitism envoy that can write letters and all kinds of.
Deborah Lissa, I don't think she was. I think her hands were tied in the Biden administration. Now they haven't appointed one for the new Trump administration. Even though I heard Dov Hikind, Shabbos Kestenbaum, and Howard Jonas are three of the people that are contenders for that position.
Right, but I'm saying that position, might be an important position, but this is a national security threat. So put, Shabbos and all those people, Dov, whoever, on the National Security Council, maybe not, you could, or have some sort of a liaison there. Like, look at it mentally as a national security threat to the United States on a broad level, like the ICC, and on a tactical level. Like, let's say you want to, disrupt. Let's say you want to burn Washington D.C. You can't just do that. But if you say, oh, no, I am doing anti-Israel protest like they've done when, in August or in July, that's legitimate. So I'll get a license by the police to do an and then I'll burn the streets and the monument and desecrate the nation's capital. So on multiple levels, I'm showing in the book, the assault on Judaism is becoming a threat to the United States, and therefore should not just be handled in the isolated world of anti-Semitism or of combating anti-Semitism, but should be viewed as a national security threat. So that's one thing. And the other thing that I really think that maybe more relevant to your audience is to get rid of this ludicrous idea of zero tolerance to anti-Semitism, traditional anti-Semitism, which was the threat in the 20th century, and having green light to anti-Zionism and Israel bashing, which is the existential threat to the 21st century. So there's a few of those things like shifting, like understanding that the threat is not coming from just traditional anti-Semitism vectors, but is coming from an attempt to negate the Jewish state, to understand that it lends itself to an attempt to negate the idea of Judaism, and to understand that is a proxy for an assault on America as well.
Thank you for joining us, Gal Kalev. The book is called The Assault on Judaism. The existential threat is coming from the West. Thank you for being part of our show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm Holline, for making the introduction, but thank you for being part of our show. Okay, there you heard it about the attack against Judaism. When we come back, we'll look at Hanukkah and Rabbi Shia Herzl, the National Committee for the Furtherance of Jewish Education.